Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Becoming Chiron, the key to unlocking healing and personal alchemy, with your hostess, me, Ursula Duffy. And today, this is episode number 7, and we are going to talk about something that is coming in perfect divine timing with my episodes and just the timing of everything since I started this podcast, and something that I have been in the thick of, the Uranus opposition. And I'm so excited to talk about this, one, just because it is so involved with my current lived experience of astrology, which is getting back to the roots of the intention of why I started this podcast in the first place. And it has so much to do with being here in this chair again, as I've said before, getting my ass in this chair and speaking up and doing this podcast. And I hope that everyone that is going through this experience now, or is just starting to go through this experience, can relate to this topic and the stories that I'm sharing, and from my own personal journey, but also generally what can happen during this time of life. But also, if you haven't gone through this time yet, I hope that this can be a guide and a reference for you moving toward it. And if you've already gone through it, I have some pointers for you as well if you're beyond the age of 42. But I will be focusing pretty much solely on the lived experience from my own personal journey. And then we'll touch a little bit on what can happen if you haven't already been through it, or if you have been through it, if you can relate. I would love to hear from you. I haven't heard from anybody yet. So if you're out there listening and these stories and topics relate to you, I would love to share your story, or just to hear anything about how everything or anything that I've shared so far has touched you or touched your life, or if you've shared a similar experience with having Chiron in the first house, any and all of the above. I would love to hear from you. So without further ado, we will do our usual Astro Weather Check, and then we'll get right into it. So today is Tuesday, August 2nd. It's around 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time right here in Atlantic City. And the moon is currently waxing through the sign of Libra. We had a very fiery, harmonious, potent new moon last week on Thursday. It was the Leo new moon, which had a very supportive flow of energy, fire energy from Jupiter and Aries. So that energy last week with that new moon should have felt pretty good. I hope that if you did any intention setting or ceremony around it, that you had a little extra enthusiasm and oomph to whatever you were dreaming up at the time, and that you're still dreaming up while the moon is still waxing. I did a very special ceremony around it with my own very specific set of intentions. This was in my 4th house, and that's also where my North Node is in Leo. So this new moon in particular, on this journey that I will talk about with my Uranus opposition, me just becoming more and more of my authentic self. Pretty much all of my intentions were surrounding that theme, and just coming home to my roots even more, returning to the location of my birth and where I grew up and where my dad grew up. It had a lot of energy behind it for me personally. So you can check my Instagram. I took a picture of my altar. I had all kinds of crystals and flowers and things that honored the sun energy, as Leo is the only sign that's ruled by the sun. So the energy should feel pretty good right now in general. And we'll get into the biggest thing that's happening right now next, which is the triple conjunction of the North Node, Uranus, and Mars in the sign of Taurus. That was pretty much exact between all 3 of them over the course of the last few days. Mars is separating from 18 degrees right now. Mars is at 19, but the Uranus and the North Node are still together around 18 degrees of the sign of Taurus. So what this means, this is kind of rare. Uranus North Node is also kind of a energetic signature that's been building, and we will continue to be in that energy for the rest of the year. And it just, Uranus catalyzes. I'll get more into Uranus when we talk about Uranus opposition, but Uranus catalyzes. Uranus is our genius. It's our path forward into the future. And so is the North Node, collectively and individually. So, and Mars just gives extra oomph to whatever Mars touches. Mars is the planet that relates to action and drive and will. In Taurus, the energy is more of a building quality than it is action oriented. Mars rules the sign of Scorpio, and Taurus is the sign opposite Scorpio. So whenever we have a planet in the sign opposite the sign that it rules, it's said to be quote unquote in detriment. I hate the word, but that's what we say. It's not anything bad. It's just a different expression of the energy. So Taurus, it's Venus ruled. Taurus is stop and smell the roses, be in the present moment. And Mars just wants to act. So the way the planet functions in this sign is a little bit different. Mars does not want to stop and smell the roses or the flowers or anything that Venus is really into in that matter, besides sex. So with Mars and Taurus, the energy is more building, but once it starts to move, think of a bull. Once that bull starts to move and charge, it is unstoppable. So we have a lot of potent energy right now. And wherever this is happening in your chart, as I've shared, I'm a Taurus rising. This is happening in my first house. So there's just a lot of energy. If we put it to the highest vibration, I think collectively and individually, we're in good shape. On the national and global stage right now, there is a lot going on. And to get into the higher vibration, highest energy, highest expression of Taurus energy, it is just about appreciating the sweetness of life and being in the present moment and just taking moments throughout the day to just appreciate all the small pleasures that we're gifted here on Earth in this Earth experience. It's extremely Venusian in quality. It's beautiful. It's everything that we have at our fingertips right now, especially at this time of the summer season with all the delicious produce and the foods and the flowers. And if you're having trouble staying present, if you can, just get grounded. It's very grounded. It's Earth energy. So there's a revolution brewing. There's a revolution that's been brewing for a while now. And now we are almost at like a pinnacle point, and we will be for the rest of the year. Mars will move on, but the Uranus and the North Node will be together for a while because astrologers generally use 5 to 10 degree orbs to say what a conjunction really is. And they've been at 18 degrees, Uranus and the North Node together for a while, and they'll be hovering within orb of a conjunction for a while. So we've been steeping in this energy. We're at a pinnacle point, like I said, and it's still going to be with us for a while, like pretty much the entire month of August and beyond. So think about what that means for you. If you're familiar with your chart, then you know exactly where this is happening. You know over what natal planets, if you have any, it's happening. You know how it's impacting the rest of your chart. So if you can, if you're able to, just try and stay in the highest vibration of it and work towards the highest expression of it. We are currently still in Leo season. I love Leo season, although this time of the year is the time that I really like to hibernate because I do not like the heat. So I love being expressive in my comfort of my own home and air conditioning. So this is when the sun's going over the bottom of my own chart. So this is like hibernation time for me, but I still love getting on the computer and writing and doing my podcast. And we have been doing a lot more events with Sea Goddess right now. So I've been out a lot in the heat and super uncomfortable, but it's okay because it's all for the highest good and making these connections and doing the work and being out there and all of the Leo work, coming from the heart and creative expression and heart-centered creativity and just connecting with people. That's what it's all about. So the other thing that's a little bit tense with this aspect is it is square the planet Saturn. Saturn's at 22 degrees of Aquarius right now, so that's still within orb to be a square. So Saturn in Aquarius squaring North Node, Uranus, Mars. Saturn square Mars can be particularly gritty. It's just forcing us to take responsibility for our actions, to get out of our comfort zones and really own up to what we're here to do. The other thing that's a little bit challenging right now, which will pass soon, it already kind of is past. It doesn't last very long because Venus moves quickly, but we have Venus square Chiron to bring Chiron into the picture. And if you have anything coming up right now, it's Venus in Cancer, square Chiron in Aries. Anything over healing of relationships or how you feel nurtured in relationships, if anything like that is coming up at the moment for you, that's what that relates to collectively and also individually. So there's our Astro Weather Check for Tuesday, August 2nd. So let's get into the meat of this episode. As I've shared, I'll share a little bit more in depth now. Uranus has been speaking to me for a while. When I went through my spiritual reawakening experience, I had Uranus opposing my sun and all of my planets in Libra back when it was in Aries. Uranus dipped its toe into Taurus back in May of 2018, which is my first house, as we talked about, Taurus rising. And that was in divine perfect synchronicity, the time that I was in my astrology apprenticeship program. Specifically in May of 2018 was when we were on the retreat, when I gave my first reading. So all of that happening around that time was very auspicious for me and in beautiful, perfect divine timing. So the Uranus opposition for me has pretty much been amplified, like, I don't even know how to put it into words, but most people don't go through Uranus opposition this intensely because not everybody goes through it when Uranus is transiting also concurrently their first house. So what we're talking about here is when Uranus comes to the degree and sign opposite of where it was when you were born. Right now, everybody that was born with Uranus in Scorpio, which is roughly 1975 to 1981, if you were born in 1975 or any of the years in between, you're going through this. If you were born on the earlier side of it, you've pretty much gone through your Uranus opposition. I'm born in 1980, so it's still a building experience for me, but it's building more and more and more because it's going through my first house. So I have Uranus going through my first and the opposition to Uranus in my seventh. I also have Uranus conjunct Mars in my birth chart. So this has been really unique as Uranus Mars are pretty much opposing my Uranus Mars natally as well. And this whole experience for me has been the early parts of it from May of 2018 through my apprenticeship program, forcing me to find my voice and speak up. Having to do astrology readings and participate in class definitely helped me with that experience, although it was freaking terrifying and pushed me way out of my comfort zone. But I have Mercury which relates to our voice, Mercury at 8 degrees of Scorpio. So before Uranus even got close to opposing itself for me, Uranus opposed my Mercury. So having this be part of the experience of me, my voice waking up, I also came out of if anyone's really familiar with astrology around that time, I came out of my progressed Mercury retrograde phase. So that was also really interesting and perfectly divinely timed. As I keep saying, Uranus so very much relates to synchronicities and divine timing and our divinity to an extent. And just all of this happening, when I gave my first astrology reading at that retreat in May of 2018, Mercury was on my ascendant at 11 degrees of Taurus. So on my ascendant, also opposing my natal Mercury. I mean, you can't make this shit up. So this has been building for me for 4 years. Uranus pretty much stays in the sign and in one sign for roughly 7 years. And that's pretty consistent. So Uranus dropped in. Uranus went back into Aries for a little while during the retrograde that year, but it's been securely in the sign of Taurus now for several years. Inching along. During this time, it's gone over my ascendant. This triple conjunction, Mars-Uranus North Node, is happening on my Chiron at 17 degrees of Taurus. So starting this podcast and then talking about this during the triple conjunction on my Chiron, it's just so perfect. I love it. I'm in awe all the time. All these things, like I don't look ahead to see what's happening as I plan these things. I go with like I said, I go with my intuition. I go with what spirit says, the topic that comes to me when I ask. So this topic coming at this time is just so perfect. So I want to talk a little bit about just Uranus itself, and then we'll get into some resources and just more personal share. I have a lot of content I want to cover today. So Uranus. Uranus is, like I said before, the great awakener, the planet that ultimately relates to our path to our own individuation and what we came here to do on a soul level, to be our most unique, beautiful selves. And I've talked about this before. There's a lot of deconditioning, personally for me at least, that I've had to go through this process. Uranus supposedly is the only planet that orbits on its side. Uranus is the rebel, the revolutionary, the scientist, the planet that helps us look to the future, to connect to all of these energies that are just beyond our physical bodies, the physical realms. It's the first planet that's unseen. And I've seen read stories of people being able to see Uranus under very particular conditions in certain states. I personally have never seen Uranus. But interestingly, Chiron orbits between Saturn and Uranus. So Chiron's very commonly called the rainbow bridge between the inner and outer worlds, between the visible and the invisible realms. Chiron helps us connect to this Uranian peace that's in all of us. And I'll talk about this more deeply in another episode when I cover other transits that kind of surround this whole experience, but Uranus connects very directly to our Saturn return, Uranus opposition, as we're talking about, but also our Chiron return. So age 30, 27 to 30, 40, 42, and 50. Uranus is, in Greek myth, Prometheus. So the humanitarian, the god of electricity, the planet that relates very much to electricity in our own bodies, to the Kundalini energy that runs along our spines and the energy in our nervous system. I've listened to and done readings for people that have Uranus in the first house of their birth chart that have very unique experiences with electricity and lightning and EMF. Really, really fascinating how this all works and how the archetype is just how we embody this in our own physical bodies in many, many ways. The other thing, when we talk about Uranian energy and Uranus, we're talking about, like I said, synchronicity. The quality of time we're talking about is called Kairos, Kairos. And that is just relating to the perfect divine moment. My business partner and dear friend Mandy always says that luck is preparation meeting opportunity. And that quality of that Uranian energy and that Kairos time and that synchronicity, I feel, is always present in that. Because we are being guided along the way at all times by the energetic imprint in our birth charts, but also how these planets show up and speak to us. So like I said, anyone that was born with Uranus in Scorpio is currently been through, in the middle of, or on the brink of Uranus opposition. I kind of feel, based on my own personal experience, that it kind of starts after the second nodal return, around age 38, 39. The nodal returns happen every 18 and a half years. So nodes by transit are returning to the same degree and sign as they were when you were born. So my nodal return experience I've talked about, that was when astrology came back to me. And that really set the stage for this energy of my Uranus opposition. And when I did the episode about my exit from the corporate world, I think that I said that my experience going through all of that deconditioning and realizing that that wasn't what I was really supposed to be doing with my life and everything was early onset midlife crisis. And this time of life is generally, popularly referred to as the quote unquote midlife crisis, this Uranus opposition time. Because a lot of times it can show up for people, if they're not living in alignment, as the shit really hitting the fan. I've been called recently to rewatch the movie Eat, Pray, Love, or read the book. I read the book first and then I saw the movie. If you've never read that book or seen that movie, I highly recommend it if you're going through this experience or on the brink of this experience, because that is very much a Uranus opposition story. I'm pretty sure she says in there at some point that she's around the age of 40 when this all happened. And in rewatching it, just so many scenes stick out in my mind at this point. But one of the things in particular, when she's sort of up in the middle of the night and just really sad and looking around and saying that she actively participated in the creation of everything that she's currently living, but she couldn't see herself in it anymore. If you're out of alignment, which she was, then that's the kind of thing that can happen. Those are the types of feelings that can arise, and there's nothing wrong with it. But I highly recommend, if you're going through this or on the brink of this or 38 going into this, and you're feeling out of alignment with your life and experiencing similar things that were conveyed in that book and that movie, it's time to get serious, and it's time to take some responsibility. We go through our Saturn return, and anything that's left over for healing or taking responsibility for or adulting after that experience comes up during the Uranus opposition. For me personally, it was finding and being real about who I really am. Like I said, finding my voice and finally starting to speak up. It was and is for me, just because it's happening in my first house, just uncompromising. If there's something out of alignment for me anymore, I don't do it. I don't say yes when I mean no, like I used to all my life, ever. And we have this saying now in Sea Goddess that we've been using when we, think about doing events and things like that. If it's not a fuck yes, then it's a no. And I am so much in that energy, and I have been now for years since this really started for me. So it is major upheaval for me, but in a different way, because I am doing my best to be as in alignment as possible with my own chart. Having that tool for self-awareness has been so valuable for me. And just really feeling into the lived experience for me, just because it's happening in my first house. I've experienced things in my body. That whole episode about healing the root has been a big part of this. You can experience things like spontaneous spiritual awakenings when that Kundalini starts to rise and awaken on its own. It can be a lot of energy. It can be a lot of sexual energy. A lot of the quote unquote midlife things happen. You hear affairs and all sorts of things that can come from this experience. And that can be from not being in alignment, but it can also be just from the enhanced and amplified sexual energy that also comes with this transit. There can be things that happen to us that are a healing journey. There can be illnesses that come along with it. You hear, I've personally known a lot of people that develop certain health conditions around the age of 40. So just knowing what's going on behind the scenes with your chart is really, really important. A really good resource for this time, I found the best book to be Barbara Hand Clow's Astrology and the Rising of Kundalini, the Transformative Power of Saturn, Chiron, and Uranus. I have this book on Audible. If you get it on Audible, make sure that you download the accompanying PDF. I can't read to you quotes from it because I don't have the paperback version, but I can say that, and we'll get into Barbara's work a lot more when we talk about Chiron more specifically, like through the houses and signs. I'll pull from her book a lot on Chiron. But her work is really exceptional because she touches on the energy and what's happening in our bodies, the Kundalini in particular, and just like the cosmic energy, the cosmic experience of these transits, and the euphoria that can come with Uranus transits in particular. It can be shit hitting the fan, and it's a super catalyst, but if you're honoring it, there's nothing like it. I've never experienced anything like this in my entire life, and I probably never will once it's done. But it's been a huge healing journey, particularly for me. Like I said, I have Chiron in the first house, so this is all part of my Chiron journey. But it's important to know where this is happening in your own chart, where your Scorpio Taurus axis is, because the houses in particular play a very important role in the flavor of the experience. Also, what other planets are involved in your natal chart, all a huge part of it. So I highly recommend that book if you want to learn more and study more about this, regardless of where you are in the transit. Barbara also did an interview on Astrology Hub with Amanda, the owner and founder of Astrology Hub. So you can actually hear Barbara's own words in that interview about the book and about the Uranus opposition experience and all of the things that she talks about in the book. That is on YouTube, I believe, but also Astrology Hub's website. You can just search for Barbara Hand-Cloud and Astrology Hub, and it'll come right up. Also highly recommend that interview. Rewatching or rereading Eat, Pray, Love. If you haven't yet, please check that out. That is an awesome resource. That's just relatable and it's fun. You just get to sit back and watch the movie. But I found myself getting super emotional during a lot of it because my Saturn return experience was kind of like what she goes through in the beginning. But just the title of it, Eat, Pray, Love, like it just so encapsulates the things that this whole transit and experience, this personal revolution, if you will, the bigger meaning of it, just to get you back to yourself and to really get back to the roots of why we're here. And it is just to enjoy life and love and be happy and live in the highest vibration of our charts as possible. So the other thing another resource that's out there is actually one that I wrote. I just got my first article published. I think it was in the fall. I actually wrote about the Uranus opposition, and it was published in the Holistic Fashionista magazine, issue number 66, which is the last print version of that series of that magazine. And that's also on the website. I'll put the link in the show notes if you want to read that. It touches on my own personal experience, but also tips and pointers of how to navigate this time and resources as well. I can't stress enough the importance of knowing your chart and having astrology and that at your fingertips and knowing where this is happening in your chart. I love working with people that are going through Uranus opposition or have just gone through it or on the brink of it, because it's just such an incredible time. It's such an incredible opportunity to just get back to your individuation. My astrology teacher once said that at the Saturn return, age 27 to 30, we have the choice to take the Saturn path or the Uranus path. And I find that to be extremely true, going through Saturn return already and being in the middle of my Uranus opposition. Had I taken the Uranus path at that point, a lot of the things that I've gone through at this point in time, I probably wouldn't have gone through, or there would have been much different experiences. Like I could be teaching astrology and aromatherapy in another country at this point. Like who knows what could have happened had I navigated that experience differently. But going into these things, it's just super important, I think, to have that self-awareness part and to have the tools. Even it's not even just astrology. Like if you've had Akashic records readings or past life regressions, like just some kind of, like I say, living in touch with your soul going into this or during this is really, really, really important, in my opinion. So I put the link to the Holistic Fashionista article in the show notes. You'll have that. And then I just wanted to as this is all coming from my own words and my own experience at this point, I read from the Venus card from my Black Moon astrology cards. In last episode, we did the Venus card. And Venus and Uranus are interestingly related. Uranus is said to be like the higher octave of the Venusian energy. So I thought it could be cool to just read the summary of the Uranus card from this deck, just to put it into a different perspective, or if this verbiage speaks to you more than what I've said so far. So the message on the Uranus card is genius. And the quote on the card is, "The public is wonderfully tolerant. It forgives everything except genius." And that's a quote by Oscar Wilde. And I'll just read in this deck, they have a longer description of what the card means, but they also have the card in brief. So I'll just read the Uranus card in brief from this book now for this episode. It says, "Rapid changes, shocks, jolts, sudden transformations, the unexpected, revolution, government overthrows, rebellion, bucking against authority, turbulence, and upset in the usual patterns, unpredictability, being knocked off balance, relocation, feeling shattered, being erratic, not staying on course, innovation, originality, novelty, the taboo, the sense of being different, going against the status quo, counterculture, the avant-garde, alienation from your peer group, estrangement, autism, genius, intuition, intelligence, ingenuity, innovation, bolts of insight, a leap in consciousness, acts of discovery, computers, the World Wide Web, brotherhood and sisterhood, homosexuality and bisexuality, transgender people, skies, lightning, thunder, and stormy weather, pewter, electric blue, oddballs, nerds, science, physics, electromagnetism, research, technology, robots, science fiction, flight, space travel, planets, outer space, UFOs, aliens, and foreigners." And the corresponding tarot card is the Tower, which is one of my favorite cards. And it says the key ideas are change, revolution, shocks, genius, technology, alternative lifestyles. And I pretty much can say that we have all of that going on in the collective consciousness right now, on the national stage, on the global stage. Look at what's happening with our food supply, with our financial systems. All of this relates to Uranus and Taurus in particular. The other things that the card says, all of those keywords relate to the Uranian energy in general. So know where Uranus is in your chart. Know what aspects it makes to other planets in your chart. If you have Uranus in your first house, the point is embodying this energy. If this is happening kind of on an opposite scale for you, if you're a Scorpio rising, then this is happening in your seventh house. And that whole experience is pulling in people, partners, spouses to an extent that will really teach you about this experience. So, important things to keep in mind talking about this. The other deck that I highly recommend for navigating this experience and spiritual guidance during this experience is called Sacred Rebels: Guidance for Living a Unique and Authentic Life by Alana Fairchild. Whenever I'm doing a reading for somebody that's going through some kind of Uranus transit, I always pull from that deck. It's a beautiful, beautiful deck. And I love the idea of sacred rebellion. The woman who started Holistic Fashionista has now kind of transitioned a lot of her work into another brand called Sacred Anarchy. I love, love, love the idea of that as well, because it really encapsulates this Uranian energy. It's beautiful. It feels like complete upheaval, but there's so much beauty and opportunity in that. I can speak from personal experience. I mean, I don't even know if I've talked about some of this, but towards the end of 2020, I was working full-time still in the job that I recently left. I was doing more readings than I've ever had done before after my psychic teacher's podcast interview. So pretty much working 2 jobs full-time, running my business, and I just kind of gotten into Sea Goddess at that point in time. So 2 businesses, planning a festival, working full-time, and I moved. So it was intense. And this experience is intense. I will not sugarcoat it. But the other side of it, the middle of it, all of it, when you stop and smell the roses, it's absolutely beautiful. And also to just touch on what the card said about the alienation part or being the black sheep or anything like that's Uranian energy right there. But the whole point is to stay true to yourself. And we're coming up on almost a year now that I've been out of the corporate world and that job. And talk about alienation, I have not heard one thing from any single person that I worked with the entire time I was where I worked for 11 and a half years. So this time of the year right now is bringing up a lot for me personally. As this transit continues, I'm sure I will pull more and more pieces into future episodes. If you're going through it, I would so love to hear from you, especially if your experience is similar to mine with Uranus going through your first house. I am going to stop there for today. I think I've said everything that I wanted to say. I did have some notes for this one because I had so much to say. But as I've said before, feel free to email me, ursaalchemy@gmail.com. My websites are ursaalchemy.com and seagoddesshealingarts.com. If you're, like I said, on the brink of this experience, I would love, love, love to read for you. I offer astrology readings and astrological aromatherapy consults. If you like this show, we're now at episode 7. I would love to hear some feedback. Anything I can do better or topics that you want to hear about. Like I said, it's pretty much spiritually guided, but I can pull anything in. And also too, if this is part of your Chiron experience, if you were past your Uranus opposition going into your Chiron return and some of these things are resurfacing for you, that is very much typically what can happen. It's all part of the healing journey. It's all part of our soul's growth. So I'm going to wrap that up there. And in the spirit of so much of Chiron and Uranus, remember to be a maverick. Bye.